Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Frank's Amazing Podcast. I am your host, Frank Cugino. The New York Mets wrapped up their three-game set against the Colorado Rockies and won the series in pretty dramatic fashion in the final game. That really was the telling game, the rubber game of the series, because obviously, after the Dodgers series, you weren't feeling too great. Sunday was a real gut punch because it looked like the Mets might have a very nice victory to win the series against the best team in the National League in the Dodgers. But unfortunately, the bullpen blew it, and the worst part about it was the two guys that you felt were actually reliable for the Mets, because we know the story has been all the times that the bullpen has blown these games, but you have known that Seth Lugo has been your best reliever and Justin Wilson has been your second best. And the Mets went to both of them. They each gave up a run. They lose that game on Sunday. So then it puts you in a tough spot. Not so much where you're like, oh my gosh, the Mets are so many games back. There's no way they're going to get to the wild card. But more so, it was what the competition was doing. Cubs were doing well. Brewers were doing well. And then on the other side, it's like how many games are left? Because you could say, oh, the Mets are only 4 games out, 5 games out, 3 games out, whatever the number is. But it's just like there's only 14 games left, 13 games left. So it makes it just very, very hard to do. But the way the scores are going right now, the Mets might be in good shape going into the Cincinnati series. So that would definitely help them out a lot. But on Monday, like I said, you weren't feeling so great about Sunday. And you're like, all right, well, we've seen so many times this season where it's like, all right, Mets are done, forget it, season's over. But then they come back, they give you a couple nice games, and some weird stuff happens, and they're back in it. And on Monday, you're like, all right, well, let's see how they bounce back. It looked like they were going to win this game. I have to be honest with you. Once the Mets were starting to get their offense, and you knew there were going to be a lot of runs scored. I mean, it is Coors Field, and that's something I said in the previous podcast. I said I know the Mets will score runs in this series because I like this lineup. I know it doesn't perform every game, and a lot of times it's very untimely when they don't get the hits, like the Atlanta series or the Chicago series or the Dodger series. A lot of these big home series, and the Mets just bats don't show up. But in Coors Field, no matter what, these guys were going to score some runs. And when I'm watching Brandon Nimmo give me production, I'm watching Jeff McNeil give me some production, P. Alonso getting a couple hits, Rosario driving in a run, I was like, all right, Matz is on the mound, and I have to tell you, I've been feeling really well about Steven Matz. I felt like he's finally being the pitcher that we have been waiting for all along ever since 2015, where his first year was actually a really good rookie year. Then after that, injuries affected him and just a lot of inconsistencies in his starts, good starts, bad starts. But unfortunately, it was a very vintage Steven Matz performance. And what I mean by that is Matz looks good, but then he just has a complete meltdown and explosion where it's just like a couple things go wrong, whether it's the defense not being great. We saw J.D. Davis make an error in this game. Maybe missing a couple calls that he should have gotten, and he had 2 walks in this game. And just little stuff like that. And before you know it, Matz unravels on the mound, gets flustered, and he'll give up some home runs. And in Coors Field, it's going to happen. But, Matz just was not able to stop the bleeding. And the Mets had the lead before Matz had his meltdown. And then before you know it, the Rockies scored 7 runs. And the Mets really were not able to come back into it after that. And that was a pretty tough loss because, like I just said, you had the bad loss on Sunday. You were hoping to bounce back. Monday wasn't so good. And you're like, all right, now the Mets are 5 games out of it because their other competition, the National League wildcard race, was doing well. And you're like, all right, what's going to happen here? And then the second game of the series, you have Marcus Stroman on the mound. And if you remember, Stroman had that really, really good start against the Diamondbacks his last start. His only good start as a Met so far. And with the way Coors Field is, and like I said, runs are going to be scored, I was concerned about Marcus Stroman. I was like, I really don't feel too confident about this. But of course, Marcus Stroman throws an absolute gem. His other best start, I would say this one is probably even better considering the ballpark, not so much the competition. Colorado Rockies are not one of the best teams in the league. They are not in the wild card race or the race for their division. But in Coors Field, it's never easy to win because runs are going to be scored. And it's like, can you match that? And as a pitcher, can you kind of prevent it and not let it get too bad? Keep the score relatively close for your offense to pull out the win. And Marcus Stroman did just that, pitching 7 scoreless innings. And you know what? It should have been a 9-inning team shutout, but Luis Avilan gives up a full count home run to Charlie Blackmon, and it was an absolute bomb. But still, I mean, that would have been nice because they said on the broadcast that the Colorado Rockies have not been shut out in Coors Field since May of last year. And I think that would have been nice for the Mets pitching staff to do. Not the biggest deal in the world. I mean, obviously with this wild card race, with this bullpen, with this manager, I mean, we have much more things to be concerned about than a shutout in Coors Field. But I just thought it would have been something nice to see. But again, I get another home run out of Brandon Nimmo. And I'll tell you what, I know I'm probably going on a limb on saying this. I know I'm probably going to regret saying this. But one of the things we talk about, what are some of the Mets' weaknesses? And obviously we know bullpen. But the other thing that I always talk about is center field. I always feel like center field, ever since Carlos Beltran left, has not been a solid position for the Mets. Something that you feel confident about. It's like, all right, the Mets have a really good center fielder. And I'm not talking so much about offense. I'm talking about defense too, because center field, I mean, that's a very important position on the field. The guy needs to cover a lot of ground, make a lot of tough plays. And we talk about preventing runs. You want to prevent runs. You don't want singles to be doubles or outs to be doubles or home runs, whatever the case is. You want your center field to help you defensively and give you some production offensively. And I felt that in this series, and ever since he's come back and what he did last year, I felt that Brandon Nimmo is a really good player, a productive player. And with the way the team is currently constructed, I believe Brandon Nimmo deserves to be the New York Mets starting center fielder. And I think the Mets can survive with him out there. I truly, truly believe that, and it's for a few reasons. Number one, the most important thing, Brandon Nimmo's on-base percentage. His on-base percentage, as of right now, it's in the 370s, and that's what Nimmo's here for. He's here to be an on-base machine, which he was last year. So it's not like we're like, it's only a year that Brandon Nimmo has a high on-base percentage. Well, guess what? He was one of the top guys in on-base percentage last year. So now, this is 2 years in a row that Nimmo's given the on-base percentage. Has he been hurt all year? Yes. Has he struck out a lot? Yes. Does he have a high average? No, he does not have a high average. But since he's come back, he's getting his walks, which is most important, getting on base. He's hitting some home runs, getting some timely hits. I mean, Brandon Nimmo had the hit on Sunday for the Mets to have the lead against the Dodgers. They were not able to capitalize off it, but Brandon Nimmo got the big hit. And in this comeback, Brandon Nimmo got the big hit again. So it seems just like Nimmo is giving you a lot of production since he's come back. Looks more like the player he's supposed to be. And you wonder if the next thing is why Brandon Nimmo really couldn't get it going when he was first here before they finally decided to put him on the injured list. Because if you remember, Brandon Nimmo hurt his neck running into the wall in Atlanta, and he continued to play after that. He wasn't any good, but you obviously have to wonder if the neck was affecting him offensively because, like I said, ever since he's come back, he's looked much better, and he looks more like the guy last year. And I just think he's somebody who is worth having out there in center field next season. So that's just something that I've been thinking about, and something that I really want to go out and say just so that it's out there. Not that it matters, but I just think that people should know the way that I feel about Brandon Nimmo, because here I am, I'm trying to analyze the Mets and what we could do, what we can't do, what things need to be improved if you were to ask me. And I think Brandon Nimmo deserves a shot in center field, because the thing is that there aren't that many just out of this world tremendous center fielders right now in baseball. Obviously, you're not going to get Mike Trout or any of these other guys. I mean, the Braves have Ronald Acuna play center field sometimes, and you're not getting Acuna. So it's kind of like I talked about with the catchers, where Ramos, he could be upgraded because he's not very good defensively and he's older. He doesn't have any speed. But the top tier catchers, you're not getting any of them because it's such an important position. And I feel that the same could be said for center field. And even Brandon Nimmo, he is not your traditional center fielder. He's a corner outfielder. And that's what we've seen far too often for the Mets ever since Carlos Beltran has left. Other than Juan Lagares, who can't hit, we've had Yohan Cespedes play center field. He's a corner outfielder. And we've had Michael Conforto play center field. He's a corner outfielder. And like I said, even Nimmo is a corner outfielder. But still, I just think that you can survive with him, and I don't think it's the Mets' top problem. I think the Mets should be more considered with having a lineup that every day is consistent, and what I mean by that is that you're always getting just a couple runs. And I believe that if you have somebody like Brandon Nimmo who has a high on-base percentage, if he's just going to give you a walk a game and a hit here or there, at least he's getting on base and just gives you opportunities to score runs. And this way, every game, you at least have some runs, and that will help you win more games instead of having all or nothing hitters. And now that brings me to my next point. One of the other things I want to talk about in this podcast before we continue to break down these games, something that has also come to my mind recently, and it really showed at the end of the final game of this series, and that is Robinson Cano. Now, when the Mets first acquired Cano, I was all for it because I know the type of hitter that Robinson Cano is, and I know that he would provide value to the Mets because, like I've said, the Mets have in the past have had a lot of all-or-nothing hitters. They still have a few of those guys in players like Michael Conforto and Todd Frazier. I mean, it's okay to have a couple. We don't want a whole team of them. We saw what happened to the Yankees last year. They had those all-or-nothing hitters. But to get to my point, Robinson Cano, I felt that he could do a lot of things. I believe that he could hit for a pretty good average. I know that he could take the ball to the opposite field, not strike out that much, and like I've been saying, just give you a little bit of production. I think that Cano is capable of all those things. But when I felt that way, that was before the emergence of J.D. Davis. And I think J.D. Davis is such an underappreciated, underrated guy that is not talked about enough, big-time player for the Mets, and we want to kill Brody. And you know what? That Diaz-Cano trade, it might be the worst trade in the history of baseball, honestly, with the way it is going so far after the first season. But I just think that we can't say that Brody was a complete failure because he's done a few things here. Number one, he signed Wilson Ramos, which is something I wanted the Mets to do for years, and I'm still so glad that Ramos is on this team, and he's done big things. I mean, he got the rally started today in the final game of the series. And one of the other things that Brody did was, getting J.D. Davis. I think that's a big deal because you know what? We have not seen, at all in Mets history where they find a player in the Houston Astros farm system and bring them to the team, and all of a sudden they become a guy that bats for an above 300 average, hits 20 home runs, plays multiple positions, doesn't play them well, but he plays them. He's good. He's not good. He's great in the clubhouse. He's a good team player. The guys like him. He likes being here. That is stuff you can't teach. That is something that talent doesn't do. Because you'll see all the time in these major sports. Think about just having in football and Antonio Brown and the Raiders. The way he forced his way to Oakland, being a baby and crying and complaining. I know J.D. Davis is no Antonio Brown, but it's just like you want a team of a bunch of guys that have good character, good energy. Because you know what? When you have a J.D. Davis personality and a Pete Alonso personality and a Brandon Nimmo and a Jeff McNeil and a Conforto and a Rosario, even a Todd Frazier, that is why the Mets have been so resilient. It is the character of the individuals on this team. If you had a bunch of self-centered guys who are just about getting their numbers, don't really care about the team, you would not have the above 500 record that you do now, and even the thought of being in a wild card race. If the Mets had a bunch of guys who didn't care, when they were second to last in the National League, it would have been so easy to throw in the towel, give up, say it's not our year, we'll get them next year. But no, this team has not done that. They have fought back so much, and I just believe that J.D. Davis has been a massive part of it because I know this is something that doesn't show up in the stat sheet. It's not in your analytics. It maybe doesn't help you win games, but I think it does. I think it's a little thing. You go on Google and you look up J.D. Davis gifts. And you know what? I'm pretty sure it's how you say it. You see J.D. Davis doing all these little dances, little celebrations. And you know what the best part is? J.D. Davis isn't celebrating for J.D. Davis. He's celebrating for Pete Alonso. He's celebrating for Michael Conforto. He's celebrating for the Mets. And I think another thing that I don't think I've talked about, but I thought it was so important, when J.D. Davis got the walk-off hit for the Mets, again, another big play by J.D. Davis, in the post-game interview when J.D. Davis absolutely screamed at the top of his lungs, "Let's go Mets," I just thought that was such a big thing for this team, just to show you the complete passion that a young player has. If you don't remember, I'll pull it up right here. There's J.D. Let's go Mets! When he did that, you could just hear the energy in the stadium. That was such a big moment for me. I think it proved that he wants to be on this team, and it's why these guys have been so resilient. You could say Mickey Callaway's not a good manager, but hey, at least the team plays for him. That is partially true, but I think the reason why they play for him is that these players would play for anybody because these are just young guys that want to win in the worst way. And you listen to the interviews, you listen to what Pete Alonso says or to what Jacob deGrom says. All these guys are team first players, and I just think it is so nice and refreshing to see. It's like This is a team that is fun to watch, win, lose, or draw. I don't like the manager, you know what I mean, with the silly stuff that he does, because I want to see this team do well. I want to see Pete Alonso, McNeil, Nimmo, JD Davis, Rosario, all these guys. I want to see them succeed because, you know what, all around they are good people. And, you know, this does have to do with the Mets, but it brings me to another point. Think of what just happened yesterday to Pirates all-star closer Felipe Vasquez getting charged with the pornography, with the assault or harassment, all these different things, obscene material to minors. He got charged with a million things. I mean, the guy is arrested without bail, deserves to be in jail his whole life as far as I'm concerned, because that's just absolutely sick what Vasquez did. And he's a guy who shows you no good character, not a guy you want on your team, an absolute creep like that. You would never, ever find any of these Met guys get charged with anything like that. This is a good group of people. Even if you're not a Met fan, I just think that Pete Alonso is a good person. Another point, what Pete Alonso did on the 9/11 day, I can't believe I didn't even bring this up because I get so caught up. That's the thing. We get so caught up with the stats, with the results. Is this player doing well? Is this player not doing well? But what we don't talk about enough are the human beings that are involved in this. And I just feel that when Pete Alonso told MLB Baseball, let the Mets wear a 9/11 hat, and baseball said no, which I think is just straight up dumb. But Pete Alonso said, you know what? Forget you, baseball. I'm going to have the team all wear custom-made 9/11 cleats. And I really, really love that. And another thing I love that Pete Alonso did was when he won the Home Run Derby, giving back to wounded warriors, giving back to the firefighters and all the armed people in 9/11, all the law enforcement that were involved in New York City. And I just think those are such great causes to be donating to. And you just root for somebody like Pete Alonso, whether you're a Met fan or not, because of the good person he is. Brandon Nimmo is a great guy. McNeil, all these guys. Conforto, I mean, how you love Conforto? I remember, you know, this is all small stuff. When I went to Mets Cubs, I sat, you know, by right field. I was standing over there. I walked around just to see a couple different things. And when I was in right field, Michael Conforto was there. And I watched Michael Conforto's interactions with the kids. I watched Michael Conforto throw the ball to the kid, and when the kid caught it, you know, he gave him a thumbs up and a smile. And it was just much better than any interactions that Nicholas Castellanos gave to the right field. And Castellanos, he's also a good player because I'll tell you what, where I was sitting, the Met fans were giving Castellanos a very, very tough time, messing around, but, oh, you know, Castellanos, your mom's hot. You know, just really, really silly stuff. Castellanos didn't turn his back once, didn't say anything to a fan. I mean, how many times have we seen in professional sports where these players, you know, lose their cool and get involved with the fans, say something they should have said, or do something that they should not have done? But regardless, I said in the podcast that when I went, there were way too many Cub fans at that game. But Castellanos didn't interact with any of them, at least to my recollection. But Michael Conforto was. And again, he's just a good guy. So that is why I want to see this team do well. But regardless of that, what I was going to say was about Robinson Cano. And I just think that with the way Cano, he's not as good as Jeff McNeil. And you know what? Offensively, Robinson Cano is not as good as JD Davis. And it just boggled my mind that in the final game of this series, JD Davis wasn't playing, and I believe the reason why he was not playing is because of the catch that he made in left field. And here's another example of what I was just talking about character. JD Davis runs into the wall, and he looks like he hurt himself with the way he was just laying out on the ground. And Pete Alonso runs all the way from first base to left field to check on JD Davis just to make sure he's okay. And Davis looks at him like, Pete, what are you doing here? And, you know, Pete Alonso joked, I was just making sure the Sun Bear was okay. I don't know if that's the best nickname for JD Davis, but I like it. That's another thing I love about this team. I love all the little animals and the nicknames they have. I love that Pete Alonso is the polar bear and McNeil's a flying squirrel and Ramos is a buffalo and I guess JD Davis is a sun bear or whatever. I love all the nicknames. I think it's very, very fun. It's very exciting. And you know what? The Mets have made a killing off of it with the, you know, merchandising and stuff like that because silly me, I love Alonso so much and I happen to like polar bears. I got a polar bear shirt for myself. I do have that. I guess I'll wear that on the next podcast, even though you won't be able to see it with the way the camera is so zoomed in on my face. But also, their next feature Friday is that Jeff McNeil as the flying squirrel with the little tail. And you know what? I want to get that shirt so badly But I just know that when I go to the Met game, it's $100 because the tickets are so expensive, and I gotta get the food and maybe a stuffed animal and some ice cream and just all the different things that go on with the Mets game. Pay for the transportation to get there, and it's just a very, very expensive event. So I would love to get the McNeil shirt, but I don't think I'll be going because during my work schedule I'm just not going to be there in time. So that really stinks. But still, I just think that I know actually that, let's just say, this is another thing that I've been thinking about that I just want to mention. Let's just say that Yoenis Cespedes, because, here's the thing, hear me out. Yoenis Cespedes is going to be in his walk year next year. So that means that there's a pretty good chance that Cespedes is going to be on the field and Cespedes is going to be playing his butt off so that some fool, it better not be the Mets this time, gives Cespedes a ton of money again. And hopefully it's not the Mets. But Cespedes is going to try as hard as he can to make sure that he gets his money. Cespedes will play next year. I know it. You could book it. Cespedes will play next year. And I'm concerned that with the money Cespedes is being paid, with the money Robinson Cano is being paid, and obviously Alonso's going to be there, and Conforto's going to be there, and Ramos will be there, McNeil should be there, Rosario's going to be there. That tells me a few things. Number one, J.D. Davis is not going to play, and I don't like that at all because I think that J.D. Davis is a really good player. And let's just say, for the sake of arguments, let's say the Mets, and Jed Lowry's getting paid $10 million, so I think Jed Lowry may play next year too. So let's just say that Jed Lowry's playing, and then they do something, let's say the Mets do something weird here, and they have maybe McNeil in that outfield spot, Conforto in center, and they have Cespedes in left. They just move guys around. What if Brandon Nimmo's not playing? So now, because of Cespedes, because of Cano, maybe because of Lowry, and because the Mets have other good players, and who knows, maybe they bring in another free agent at a high value for the first year, and they're going to be playing. You mean to tell me that now J.D. Davis and Brandon Nimmo are going to play? J.D. Davis, because of Cano, he wasn't playing today. And let me ask you this. In the ninth inning, who got the better hit? J.D. Davis or Robinson Cano? So let's get this straight. The Mets are still behind when J.D. Davis comes up to the plate. After Ramos gets there, he should have been playing all along. That's the next thing I want to get to. Ramos gets the hit, then J.D. Davis gets the hit. Robinson Cano comes up. What does Cano do? He hits into a double play. Meanwhile, Seth Lugo gets an RBI single, but Robinson Cano is heading to a double play. When has Cano, I know he's been hurt this year and he's stunk this year, but when has Cano got the big hit? Never. And here's the other thing. Let's just say that in the next homestand, whether it's the Marlins or the Braves, whoever it is, let's just say Robinson Cano gets a walk-off hit. And they interview him. Do you think that Robinson Cano is going to show the passion and the excitement and scream, "Let's go Mets," the way J.D. Davis did? Or the way Pete Alonso goes, "LFGM, let's go," something like that? You think Cano's going to do that? No, because Cano cares a lot about him. So I don't really think that we would see that of Cano. He doesn't show the passion or the excitement that these other younger players show. So I just don't want to see next year that because of Cano and Cespedes and older players that J.D. Davis, if McNeil doesn't play, I'm going to absolutely lose it. But Nimmo, I just think that these younger guys are better than Cano, and they deserve to play. And unfortunately, due to money, Robinson Cano is going to play, and he's going to take up their time. And here's the other guy I think is better than Robinson Cano, Joe Panic, who is someone who has been completely forgotten about now because the Mets have a good lineup. They really do. Whether you like it or not, they're going to play the guys that are getting paid a lot of money. They're not going to pay them just to sit on the bench, whether they're bad or not. And I'm talking about Cano and Frazier. And Panic, he's got a higher average than Cano as a Met. And I just have more faith in Joe Panic than I do in Robinson Cano. And that sounds crazy because it's a complete shift from the way I felt about Cano going into the year. But you know what? I feel the same way about Edwin Diaz because I was a big Edwin Diaz fan as there was. I was so excited to have him on this team. But then when he was just a complete nightmare and a disaster, I'm not into Edwin Diaz anymore. And that's another guy I want to talk about. I really don't know what the heck to do with him, to be honest with you. But still, I think that it is worth, and I tweeted this, it is worth considering for the Mets to give Robinson Cano all of his money in the offseason, all 4 years that are remaining, and cut him and say, "Get out of here, Cano." Because I just think that there is the chance, and I know in a few years it's definitely going to happen, but even next year, I think there is a possibility that Robinson Cano is going to be bad, get paid to be bad, and most importantly, block a spot for one of these young players. If Robinson Cano blocks a spot for J.D. Davis or for Brandon Nimmo or any of these other young players, Joe Panic, any of these other guys, I will be so angry it is not even funny. So I really don't want to see that happen. And I know the Mets aren't going to do it, but it's just something that they really should consider because I can see it happening. And we know that Cano is going to be worse every year going forward because of his advanced age and his body is finally breaking down. I mean, look at the way his hamstring completely fell apart this year. Of course, he came back like this, which is still a little shady, but, that's besides the point. But I just think these are all things that the Mets have to consider. But after the tough loss on Sunday, they get the nice 6-1 victory on Tuesday. Now, Wednesday, the big game here. And why is it a big game? Noah Syndergaard on the mound. And you know what? Noah Syndergaard, we talked about him crying and complaining about not getting his catcher. Oh, I want Tomas Nido. Oh, I want Rene Rivera. But they said, you know what? Wilson Ramos is a great hitter, and Tomas Nido and Rene Rivera don't hit, so you're going to get Wilson Ramos. And Noah Syndergaard did not pitch well against the Dodgers, and that was really unfortunate. But here's the thing, it's like they finally grant his wish and they give him Rene Rivera on this final game of the series, even though Wilson Ramos had every right of playing, but they give him Rene Rivera. And I was just really curious to see what Noah Syndergaard was going to do, because the thing that really drove me crazy is that we know how bad Marcus Stroman has been since he got here. I mean, he's given up a ton of runs, a ton of hits, base runs. I talk about it every time. But Marcus Stroman is trying to escape like a million jams every single time that he pitches. Not a million, but 4 or 5, whatever it is. And for Stroman, because he was struggling so bad, the Mets said, you know what, let's give him Tomas Nido. Maybe because he's a defensive catcher, he'll help get Stroman to pitch well. And it didn't work. I mean, the first start, Stroman was still bad. Then he was good. But this start in Coors Field with Ramos catching, Stroman was excellent. So here's what we've come down to now. Jacob deGrom pitches amazing with Wilson Ramos behind the plate. Steven Matz has pitched at his best with Ramos behind the plate. Marcus Stroman has pitched well with Ramos behind the plate. Seth Lugo, who is amazing again today. Seth Lugo was tremendous. He pitches great with Wilson Ramos behind the plate. So how could you mean to tell me that every single pitcher on this team that's actually good pitches well with Wilson Ramos behind the plate except for Noah Syndergaard? Are we sure that Wilson Ramos is the problem and not Noah Syndergaard? Because how come all these other pitchers could pitch just as well when Ramos is behind the plate, but Syndergaard can't? I don't buy that. And you know what? Noah Syndergaard, this is another thing that a lot of things have been crossing my mind lately because the season is coming to an end soon, and I want to talk about, because like I did the big offseason podcast next year, I'm thinking, what are the things the Mets could do for next year, because the season is going to end soon and they might not make the playoffs. It's very possible. But one of the things the Mets have to consider, if Stroman is turning it around and you already have deGrom and you have Matz, and Syndergaard is going to keep complaining, and Wheeler is turning it around, I think it is worth finally trading Noah Syndergaard and re-signing Zach Wheeler. I know it's not the popular opinion. I know it's probably not the smartest opinion, but that is my personal belief, because what really swayed my thinking is what Zach Wheeler did Sunday against the Dodgers. That was the biggest start of Zach Wheeler's career. Zach Wheeler was injured in 2015 when the Mets won the World Series. He was injured in 2016 when the Mets got the wild card. So Zach Wheeler never pitched a playoff game or a meaningful game in his life in the major leagues. And this start against Los Angeles on ESPN, big game against the best team in the National League, going up against Walker Buehler, one of the best fine young pitchers in the league. And again, Zach Wheeler, just a big start for him. And Zach Wheeler was up to the task, pitched phenomenal. He had runners on. It was not perfect, but Wheeler got out of every single jam, and he pitched his heart out, and he pitched really, really well. He didn't cry about Wilson Ramos being behind the plate. He didn't cry about his mechanics or being sick or his slider not working. None of that. Wheeler just did his job. He did it well. And Zach Wheeler was phenomenal last year in the second half, while Noah Syndergaard was not. But besides the point, Noah Syndergaard, he had a huge start against the Chicago Cubs, August 28th. And that was a big start for the Mets because, like we've talked about, that game and that series in general can be the difference maker between the Mets making the wild card and not making the wild card, because that was the final head-to-head matchup the Mets had against the Cubs. And that was the only way they were truly going to gain complete ground on them, was beating them in the head-to-head matchup. So here's Noah Syndergaard in a big start against the Cubs, and that's when he gave up the 10 runs or 9 runs that were earned, and that is just completely unacceptable from Noah Syndergaard. And then he pitches bad against the Phillies, and he has just the nerve to blame Wilson Ramos for not pitching well in those games. Did he pitch well against the Nationals with Nito behind the plate? He sure did. Did he pitch well against the Nationals in August? Yes. He pitched well against the Pirates. He pitched well against the Royals. He pitched well against the Padres, against the White Sox. When he had that big run of the 5 games with 7 innings or more. And I was very proud of Noah Syndergaard for that. I said that on the podcast. But when you look at it now, most of those were crap teams. I mean, think about it. The Padres are no good. The White Sox are no good. The Pirates are the worst team in the National League. So Noah Syndergaard, that streak, it really wasn't all that impressive because when he had to play the Cubs, he was a nightmare. When he had to play the Phillies, he was bad. When he had to play the Dodgers, he was bad. And even today against the Rockies, to top it all off, he wasn't very good. And here is the stat of the day. I'm not going to make this a segment every time, but here is the stat of the day. Noah Syndergaard pitching to Wilson Ramos in his last start. 5 innings, 5 hits, 4 runs, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. Noah Syndergaard pitching to Rene Rivera today against the Colorado Rockies. 5 and 2/3 innings, 10 hits, 4 runs, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts. So, with Rene Rivera behind the plate, Noah Syndergaard was even worse than he was with Wilson Ramos behind the plate. So after Syndergaard was blaming Ramos for, Ramos is the reason why I can't pitch good. It's his fault. Oh, it's not me because, I'm Thor. I'm so amazing. Blames Wilson Ramos, but with Rene Rivera behind the plate, and Rene Rivera, I don't want to hear no excuses because Rene Rivera was behind the plate in 2016 when Noah Syndergaard was pitching well and was complaining about Travis d'Arnaud. And here's the other thing, that people just completely forget about this. Noah Syndergaard pitched well in 2015, pitched well in the playoffs with Travis d'Arnaud behind the plate. He's the worst defensive catcher I've ever seen as a Met. But Syndergaard pitched fine with him. So, the catchers aren't an excuse anymore, Noah. You have been caught red-handed. You are just, ratted out. This is the last straw with Noah Syndergaard today because after the game, I talk about, making excuses and everything. What does Noah Syndergaard say with a straight face? Here's the thing. Noah Syndergaard with a straight face says, because you couldn't blame Ramos anymore. He goes, I didn't have command of my slider. It's just a mental block. Maybe I need to see Dr. Phil. Is Noah Syndergaard joking, or is he joking or what? I mean, you're causing the team the playoffs. You're causing the team being able to make the wild card with your garbage performances against the Cubs and the Phillies, and now here against the Rockies and other stars in general, where Noah Syndergaard is not any good. And he wants to say, I have a mental block. I need Dr. Phil. You know what, Noah Syndergaard? I've had enough. I really have. And you know what? The Mets won the game. It's great, but they won it in spite of Noah Syndergaard. And just the way, this is the other thing that drove me crazy today, the way the Mets just accommodate to Syndergaard now. After they said, too bad, you get Ramos. You're not getting Tomas Nito Rivera. You're getting Ramos. But then he finally gets Rene Rivera. And then in the 6th inning with the Mets behind, after Noah Syndergaard pitching like crap again, Rene Rivera is at the plate. Bases loaded, 2 out. And you have Wilson Ramos on the bench. And Mickey Callaway let Rene Rivera stay in the game to bat, not bring the runners in, strand all 3 base runners, and it was because, why? Noah was still in the game, so we wanted Rivera to be behind the plate to catch Noah. So because of Noah Syndergaard, you don't want the runs with the bases loaded and Ramos at the plate. But what did Wilson Ramos do when he pinched in the 9th inning to start the rally and win the game? He drew a walk. How about that? Oh, wow, Wilson Ramos actually did something productive offensively, and one of the reasons the Mets actually won this game, scored the game-tying run. But we don't want to allocate to Noah Syndergaard. Well, we do want to allocate to Syndergaard, though, but we don't want to go to Ramos. And then on top of it all, because it was the 6th inning, personally, I didn't think Noah Syndergaard deserved to be out there because he already given up a ton of hits. So what does Noah Syndergaard do in the bottom of the 6th inning after Rene Rivera strands the base runners? Because we need to keep Syndergaard in this game, he gives up a home run and the Mets are behind. How about that? And it's just I don't even know anymore with Noah. And I've had enough. And I think I have a theory. I don't think I'm right. But hear me out. I think this is a possibility. Now, in the offseason, we heard so much about the Mets wanting to trade Noah Syndergaard, which made no sense at all. Because this was before Noah Syndergaard was doing the catcher nonsense and the Dr. Phil nonsense and all this complaining and being terrible. And we were like, why would Brody say, we want to win now, we want to win now, we're making these trades, we're giving up our whole farm system because we're going to win this year, come get us, we're going to win the division, all this other stuff. And in order to do that, you want Noah Syndergaard on this team, but Brody wanted to trade him. And you're like, why would Brody want to trade this guy? And then in the trade deadline, we heard about Brody trying to trade this guy again. And you know why I think Brody wanted to trade Syndergaard? This is my personal opinion. I think he wanted to trade Noah Syndergaard because he's a baby. I think that since Brody had Noah Syndergaard as agent, I think that all the time Noah Syndergaard will call up Brody Van Wagenen and say, oh, Brody, they're not giving me my catcher. Oh, I don't like my mechanics. Could you talk to the manager? Could you talk to Sandy also the Wilpons and tell them that I'm not happy? Thanks. I love you, Brody. Bye. And then Noah Syndergaard was always complaining, oh, Brody, talk to the general manager. Oh, Brody, talk to the manager. Take care of it for me, my agent. Now that Brody can't go talk to the general manager anymore because he is the general manager anymore, he doesn't want to hear Noah Syndergaard complaining and crying, so he wants to get rid of him and just trade him. Why else would you want to trade him? Why? If Noah Syndergaard is this great pitcher that he thinks he is and that he says he is, why would Brody want to trade this guy? Nobody can answer that. And I think that's why, because I know it's why I want to get rid of him, because I can't take it anymore. I can't take Noah Syndergaard being mediocre at best and then crying and complaining when things don't go his way and making always excuses. It's never, oh, I messed up. It's, oh, no, it's Wilson Ramos. Oh, no, it's my slider. It's missed. I need Dr. Phil. Oh, it's the mechanics. Oh, it's the weather. Oh, I wasn't feeling well. It's always something with Noah Syndergaard. And I've had it. I really have. I'm so done with him. I would trade him. I would get somebody else. I don't care if it's I don't care if it's a reliever because I'd put Seth Lugo in the starting rotation. I re-sign Wheeler. I keep Matz. I keep Stroman. I have DeGrom. I don't need Noah Syndergaard. I don't need these problems. And guess what else I get to do? I get to keep Wilson Ramos behind the plate. I don't need Tomas Nido to be there for Noah Syndergaard for his crying or Rene Rivera. I get to have Wilson Ramos get my offense and win freaking games. How about that? Because the other thing that the Mets have run into, another thing that is never, ever, ever talked about, how much Seth Lugo has done for this team. Seth Lugo is like a superhero. That is how important Seth Lugo has been because of how terrible the Mets bullpen is. And it is terrible because it's just like every single time that Lugo comes out there, I mean, today was just like, again, like the ultimate cherry on the top. Lugo has to come in the 8th inning with the Mets behind, keeps it a one-run game, so he did his job. And then in the 9th inning, the Mets, they were like, Seth Lugo is going to bat in this inning because of the offense, led by Wilson Ramos, who Noah Syndergaard doesn't want, led by J.D. Davis, who is on the bench far too often, with Brandon Nimmo, who I think should be playing in center field next year, with Jeff McNeil, who is one of the best players on this whole team, and Pete Alonso, one of the best players on this team. I mean, everybody knows that. But these guys need to stay here. That's the other thing. They need to re-sign McNeil and Alonso. I'm going to say it like until it happens. But all these guys making this big rally. Then Cano hits the double play. So I talked about that. Seth Lugo is up now, a relief pitcher who hasn't batted in years, probably since he was a starting pitcher in 2016. I think that's the last time Seth Lugo probably batted. I may be wrong, but that's the last time I remember, or that he batted consistently. So Seth Lugo hasn't been at the plate in forever. So you're not expecting him to do anything. And it's still a relatively close game. It's still a 3-run game, and you want to, really put them away. But the Mets, I mean, Mickey Callaway, I'm kind of proud of him, though, is that he has such little faith in Edwin Diaz that he still won't go to him, that he would rather have Seth Lugo bat in a critical spot than have Edwin Diaz pitch. And what does Seth Lugo do in the bottom of the inning? Throws another scoreless inning, another 6-out save, and Seth Lugo saves the day again. And it's just like every single time that Seth Lugo comes into a game, he has to throw 2 innings and do these masterful performances and completely bail the Mets out. And he did it again. And the other thing people don't talk about, Seth Lugo is still pitching with the tear in his elbow that he tore in 2016 in the World Baseball Classic pitching for Puerto Rico. And that is something that people never ever talk about. And I heard Ed Coleman on WFAN, the interview over the weekend, where Ed Coleman said that after Seth Lugo had thrown the 2-inning performance, he had ice on his elbow because that elbow was still bothering him from the tear that he has in there. And the Mets continue to just make Seth Lugo throw so many pitches and completely overuse the guy. But they have to because the only chance they have to win any game. Seth Lugo has to be a huge part of it. And, it's just like he's done so much for this team. And the other thing, Seth Lugo has made it known that he wants to be a starting pitcher. But we forget that because he never brings it up. He's not. Imagine this with Syndergaard. Imagine the Mets put Syndergaard in the bullpen and Lugo in the rotation. Can you imagine how much Syndergaard would cry? Be like, oh, I want to be like. He would do it like every single day. So it's just like, again, we talk about character. And I just think that Seth Lugo, I know, is made of such better character than Noah Syndergaard is made of. Because Syndergaard makes no excuses and always complains. Meanwhile, Lugo could be hurting, could be overused, underpaid, not in the correct role to get... I mean, that's the thing. Relievers don't get starter money. I mean, Lugo has the right to just completely just give up and complain. Be like, you guys don't pay me and you don't make me a starter. So not only do the Mets not pay Lugo, which he deserves the money, but if you're a starter, you get way more money than you do as a reliever. Look what happened to Patrick Corbin in the offseason, and look what's going to happen to Garrett Cole in this offseason. Garrett Cole is going to get a ridiculous contract because he's a great starting pitcher. Lugo is not Garrett Cole, but he's just as good as Patrick Corbin when Lugo was a starting pitcher. I believe that. And Seth Lugo is worth over $100 million if he was a starting pitcher. But because the Mets bullpen is so terrible, they've made him a reliever. And Seth Lugo has lost out on $100 million because of the Mets. And I haven't heard a single person ever mention that. Ever. I've never, ever seen it. And it's just like Lugo deserves it. Even as a reliever, he deserves $100 million. Because how many times has he every single time he has saved this team and it is never appreciated. And again, it's like, despite that, I still root for this team because Seth Lugo doesn't complain and he still does his job and he does it great. And I just root for the guy because he's risking $100 million for the Mets. You want to talk about, again, like in football, these guys holding out, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown, Melvin Gordon, and on we could go with all these major athletes in these sports that complain, oh, I don't get my money, oh, I don't get my money. Think of what Craig Kimbrell and Dallas Keuchel did. Seth Lugo has every right to do the same exact thing, but he doesn't because he wants to win, and you know what? They do win because of him, and I just think that that is absolutely great. Another thing that I want to talk about before I go, we want to talk about where the Mets standings are. The Milwaukee Brewers did lose tonight to the San Diego Padres, and of course, the Cubs were about to lose 2-1, but they tied in the 8th inning. They're currently in the 9th inning. So if everything holds out, and if somehow the Reds pull this one off, which I don't think they will, the New York Mets will be 3 games out, and that's really good because you're right there. I mean, all you need is a couple games, and you're good. And one of the other things that's happening is that the Washington Nationals lost today, and the Nationals only have a game lead over the Cubs. So how many times have we seen the Washington Nationals get these complete epic collapses and just fall off a cliff and not be able to perform when it matters most and not come through? There is a possibility that the Washington Nationals could miss the playoffs and the Mets could make the playoffs. I know it's like a single percentage points chance, but it is possible. And you know what? You want to talk about you got to believe miracle Mets. And I know that because I said that the Mets are going to do terrible in Cincinnati, but you know what? I have faith in them. I think that they're going to win the series in Cincinnati. I don't think they're going to sweep it. I do believe that they're going to win it. And I just think that you never know. Because if somehow Milwaukee loses a couple or the Cubs lose a couple and the Nationals lose a couple, the Mets could have one of those 2 spots. And the Brewers could have the first one, the Mets could have the second. There's a lot of different possibilities now if the Washington Nationals do struggle. So I think that's something to keep your eye on because every day we talk about the Cubs, we talk about the Brewers. But what if the Nationals fall out of it? And you know what? The Mets, I think they better send a big old thank you to the St. Louis Cardinals because the Cardinals beat the Nationals, and I believe the Cardinals are going to beat the Cubs as well. And when the Cardinals are beating the Cubs, the Mets could gain ground on Chicago, and obviously Milwaukee, they'll probably do well. But it's just like, so we already know that Chicago has a good chance of losing some games. So you don't have to worry about them. And then it's like, if the Brewers or Nationals don't do well, the Mets have a playoff spot. And you know what? That's the ultimate goal. And then you play the wild card game and you see what happens. So it's not over yet. We've said it a million times. We think it's over. We think it's over. It's not over yet. And I just think that's very exciting. And we'll see what happens in the Cincinnati series. I'll be here to recap it. If you liked this rant and a lot of different things I talked about, leave a like. Subscribe to keep up with all the different things that I'm going to put out about football, which I will have obviously, leading into next week, and about in the offseason with the baseball and when basketball starts. And I will have videos about all that stuff, some different things with the Mets, some other teams. I will be talking about the Yankees in the playoffs. I will be talking about the other teams in baseball in the playoffs. Comment, leave some feedback. What are your thoughts about? I made a lot of predictions in this podcast. There were a lot of things that you maybe not hear too much, like trading Noah Syndegaard or letting Brandon Nimmo be the starting center fielder next year, or Seth Lugo being worth $100 million as a starting pitcher. I mean, there's a lot of different things that I mentioned. Leave a comment. You can tell me I'm crazy. I'm willing to have healthy discussions with any of you. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one, everybody.